Okie dokie then. Got some alright ones actually today, I think if I remember correctly. But let's not pass judgment, yeah? They're just words, man. Just let them be words. AI therapists. They shouldn't be as far off as they might seem. A simplistic version seems, at least to me, almost immediately viable, if not for a small amount of technical expertise and effort investment. An app that utilizes a simple question tree type system to narrow down the likely causes of distress, and then provides guidance in the form of the most likely effective forms of action to take, shouldn't be too hard to create for someone skilled at making apps with the aid of someone trained in mental health treatment. Because, well, I imagine there are apps for like virtual therapy session, not virtual, but just therapy over your phone or on your laptop. Internet therapy, right? And I think a lot of it can be boiled down to some things, simple advice that you then tailor to the person's specific needs by getting them to answer questions or something. Okay. Another charge that I imagine would be levelled against me is that I'm a solipsist. And there would be a great deal of truth to that charge. I think I probably am, in principle, a solipsist. I don't see how solipsism could ever be disproven as a theory, but I don't admit for a second that solipsism by any means entails egotism or selfishness. So yeah, not the idea that I am the centre of the universe, but the idea that all that I can ever know to be certainly true is my own consciousness, right? Because everything gets filtered through that. That's the final frontier, as I said before. It's the irreducible part. I had an idea for a battle royale game, but with engagements like those in Pokemon. So instead of getting, having as many people can lump into a battle at once, people get secluded from the rest of the environment when they battle, so that it's more fair and you actually enter into a skill-based. Anyway, pretty stupid. By some mechanism initiated by the players exit the roaming world and enter some sort of battle realm, like the land of Hades or something. Great. So that was a bad one. I realise I am somewhat obligated to talk delicate... this was some terrible thing. Look at that. If the existential solution to the myth of Sisyphus is just to imagine him happy, why not just also imagine him not to be condemned to pushing that boulder for eternity? Imagine him into heaven with an imaginary loving God. Imagine him eating his favourite flavour ice cream without any nutritional imbalance consequences. My point is what works for Sisyphus isn't going to work for us by dint of our mortality and Sisyphus's advantage of being a fictional character for whom we are the authors. So just saying imagine him happy doesn't actually solve the bloody problem, does it? Because he's imaginary. It's like the old ad, you're in a swimming pool full of sharks and they're going, imagine you're in a swimming pool. Got that one. How do you survive? You just say stop imagining. Anyway, I was thinking about this, the potential evolutionary advantage of prayer. Why would it be? Anyway, and I also thought of the similarities between the action of prayer and the future authoring program by Jordan Peterson, which I don't like because he charges for it. When if he really believes it's that brilliant, then he should just be given that for free because he's not. Anyway, prayer and future authoring. I don't doubt that Jordan and Co.'s future authoring program does result in qualitative and quantitative improvements in people's lives. I wonder how similar in nature it might be to the act of prayer. Well, I actually don't think. Anyway. And whether prayer in many ways was a beneficial exercise for those who practiced it for this very reason. Perhaps having a conversation with an imaginary entity in your head, where you or some part of you, your subconscious or conscience say, or not, maybe it's just I don't really do it, so maybe it's just you're conscious of what you're making the supposed God say back to you. Anyway, your subconscious or conscience say, hang on. Perhaps having a conversation with an imaginary entity in your head where you or some part of you, your subconscious or conscience, say, responds to you, allowing you to have an internal conversation. You are able to converge on what it is you want. I'm going to sneeze. You're able to converge on what it is you want, and more importantly, how you might go about achieving it. Even though that part probably happens subconsciously. It's like a form of thinking. Perhaps this conversation with your subconscious is another aspect that got lumped into the idea of God, along with the seeming constancies of natural selection. So this God word became a blanket term for pretty much everything we don't understand, but that seems to dictate, or seems to be semi-tangible. So obviously nature, they recognised the patterns of evolution. Well, they didn't recognise them in that sense, but there are sequences that occur over time, right? But they didn't understand them enough. But they recognised them. They knew enough to recognise them, but then just threw it under the blanket term of God, and then other things filled the same hole because they just didn't get him right. I think a misapprehension people have about virtual reality is that we will all become absorbed in VR worlds and subsequently not get any work done, and society will fall into chaos. Oh, chaos. Jordan, you son of a bitch. But what these people fail to realise is that there isn't a clear-cut reason we wouldn't be able to integrate much of the work we do now into our VR worlds. What's so unimaginable about having a VR job, where you go to your VR office and meet with your VR colleagues, at least some of whom you would hope to be real people, of course, and have a normal work life from the comfort of your own home? In fact, I can imagine this opening worlds of possibility for innovative ways of increasing, as much as I hate that word, productivity, but also increasing people's freedom at work, increasing what's it called, like work satisfaction. Hang on, did I ever? Oh yeah. To follow up on the efficacy of prayers, of course it is destined to be an enterprise almost entirely fueled by confirmation bias. What's more, even if it could be proven to be efficacious, even if by extrapolation from the results of Jordan's future authoring, it wouldn't indicate there is any truth to the claims of there being a divine entity listening or granting the wishes. It wouldn't even necessarily indicate that it is indeed possible to converse with your subconscious. It would just show that asking for something, it would just show, if you, as much detail as you went into prayer, it would just show exactly what you just said. You can't never mind. You can't assume that the reason something is happening because there's something that you can't. Never mind. Reminded of my disposition towards the hindrances incurred by labels, atheist, liberal, conservative, etc. Or any label, just labels in general. I can imagine someone asking me, do you consider yourself an X? And me responding, I generally don't comply with using labels in that way. I think it's too overly simplistic and limits conversation and opportunity to make progress and understand one another. To which, of course, the funny response is, so you consider yourself a non-labelist. Why is the question of philosophy. In many ways, it is the only question. I think all questions are predicated on some why at the bottom. You can't have anything without why. All right. Well, everything is subject to why. I can't quite get this across for some reason, but anyway. Why, you may ask, and I won't be able to answer you because you should stop being such a cheeky ballad. Why cuts deeper than any other question can. How is a close second, but does little for us other than function as a tool to help us answer our whys. Yeah, why is a big one. I think really why gets you solipsism. It gets you kind of nihilism, but not really. It gets you gets you Descartes. Well, the best part, the only good part. Well, no, the best part, sorry. I don't know about Descartes today, so it's the only good part. But it gets you Descartes, I think, therefore I am. It gets you ethical egoism, I think. Maybe, I mean, obviously other people don't seem to be as convinced of that for some reason, but whatever. It may be the case that during quote-unquote prayer, is it prayer? Is that the American way? Prayer, and we say prayer? I don't know. Prayer. It is necessary to believe that the entity you are conversing with, it may be the case that during quote-unquote prayer, it is necessary to believe that the entity you are conversing with is God, of the supernatural, omnipotent, omniscient type. It is obviously very unlikely that this is true, and we certainly have no reason to believe it to be so, or be possible to be so. But it is imaginable that an entity that is not technically a god may wish to be perceived as such if it is going to cooperate. I'm obviously not saying this has to be so, or even that it's anything other than incredibly unlikely, but the idea of an almost psychopathically narcissistic subconscious is an interesting one. Yeah, I just like the idea. So when you... I think I kind of did pray in a no, I don't want to call it prayer, because then you have to believe in... Maybe I did for a little bit when I was young. But when you the example I think of is when you wish on a birthday cake, right? When you blow out the candles on the birthday cake and you wish for something. You wish for world peace or something like that, blah, blah, blah. But maybe you wish, I don't know, maybe you wish to score a hat-trick in a football match or something like that. Or maybe you wish for a certain girl or boy to like you, or maybe you wish for some sort of money to enter your life or something like that. Maybe you wish for money, right? The act of wishing, in a sense, kind of solidifies the idea of what you want in your mind, at least, and allows you either consciously or subconsciously to work on ways of achieving that goal. So there we go. God is a multifactorial definition for many things. I went quite godly recently. Not godly, that's wrong, but I went quite God-oriented. God is a multifactorial definition of many things that weren't fully, hardly at all, understood at the time, one of which, the kind present in prayer, is a surrogate avatar for a dialectic, not the right word, with one's subconscious. Again, I keep going on about the subconscious thing, but that's just what I just wondered if that was kind of an add-on. But the main idea is that just the act of talking to yourself about what you want might help you. It's just that I think there's probably some link to the future authoring program in it. Kaczynski's chess analogy. So in the Unabomber manifesto, he says he analogizes freedom, our lack of freedom, to a novice chess player having a grandmaster make all his moves for him when he's playing a chess match. Actually works opposite to his interpretation. Well, anyway. There would still be purpose in Mr. A's following of Mr. C's every move to observe how a grandmaster plays. It is implied that the grandmaster is better at chess, and obviously Mr. A's aim is, yes, to have fun, but also to become at least as good as Mr. C over time. Well, or as closer to Mr. C than further away. Obviously understanding what Mr. C is doing, and of course, much more importantly, why he is doing it, allows A to improve. And as Mr. A improves, his freedom is restored incrementally, until he reaches the level of Grandmaster, and he is free to innovate untethered. Of course, Mr. A is free to experiment and learn by trial and error, as well as under the tutelage of Mr. C, but ultimately, most of the time, Mr. C will be able to advise where Mr. A has done something right or made a mistake. So, obviously the analogy is Mr. C is like society and Mr. A is you, the individual. It's interesting because... Let's see if I can do this. If you imagine, in Kaczynski's world, we're all free enough to complete the power process properly, right? But really, for God's sake. Well, got distracted, didn't I? By a bloody barking dog. So in his primitive world that he envisions, there would still be some... you have to see that you need some limits on freedom, because if you just had children and sent them out into the world, then if you gave birth to children and just left them alone to be free, then they're not going to do that great. They're going to die. And obviously now the implication is that, well, we're not always children, which is right, but none of us are smart enough to run a whole society by ourselves, and so socialisation actually does work quite a bit to help maximise our well-being from an ethically egoistic standpoint. Oh, I don't like the word well-being because people fucking hate that one. Let's go with eudaimonia again. I think if there's one thing that Ted Kaczynski's manifesto has convinced me of is the importance of the so-called spiritual component of life that Sam has been advocating. It's a shame the word has such bad connotations, but not hard to see why, when more than half of it is the word spirit. It's an even greater shame that these pursuits in the minds of most people are impossible to detach from the idea of religion. So yeah, I think that's much of the answer. And well, actually, it's not just Sam. Johan Hari was also going on about it a little bit, kind of. I really think spiritual is not the right word at all. And I know they say it's just the best word we have, but just make a better word, or I'm sure there is a better word out there. Let's call it eudaimonic behaviour, or something like that. Eudaimonic life. It's like an attachments, like a life supplements, life pursuits, eudaimonic life pursuits, something like that. I don't know. Eudaimonia oriented life pursuits. Nice and simple word, Ollie. Almost as good as the word spirituality. Or spiritual. It's also a shame that seemingly the only surefire, rapid way to make significant progress in this domain is through the use of psychedelics. Okay, something I've realised about the idea of heaven is the better and more idealistic heaven becomes as a concept, the less important life becomes, real life. We see this in its totality in martyrdom, obviously, but it's just simple mathematics that the more desirable the afterlife becomes, the less desirable or significant the present one is. So yeah, that's a downside to heaven there, or the idea of heaven. The implications of ethical egoism being the true underpinnings for all our moral discourse is what the fuck? The implications of ethical egoism being the true underpinnings for all our moral discourse are complex. We are all trying to convince one another that I messed this one up. I lost my train of thought. Anyway, train of thought. I think train of thought makes it more sense because you lose a trail rather than you lose a train. You try to track back your track. Anyway, we're all trying to convince one another that our moral frameworks are superior, and that it is in the self-interest of everyone else to adopt our own. And this is exactly what we should be doing. However, some methods for verifying the validity of these moral frameworks are provably superior to others, reason being at the heart of all tenable standpoints. This sheds some light on the interactions between differing so-called religious codes of differing so-called religious codes of ethics. Believing things on insufficient evidence has serious consequences when it comes to which ethical codes are going to work out in our, and I mean both collectively and as individuals, self-interest. To reiterate, I definitely do not mean monetary self-interest or anything superficial. I mean hypothetically objective self-interest from the standpoint of eudaimonia. To believe that there is definitely an afterlife and that there are definitive criteria which must be strictly adhered to in order to enter the said afterlife, and that following a similar but slightly different criteria, or criteria from a different book, will guarantee failure to enter this positive afterlife, and may even condemn you to an objectively negative one, will have significant consequences on how we should be behaving. This may be perceived as a kind of moral relativism. I'm advocating ethical egoism. May be perceived as a kind of moral relativism, And in some small way, I suppose it might be, but certainly not in the way that doesn't allow comparisons to be made between different moral codes and confident assertions made about the superiority of some over others. So it's moral relativism in the sense that there are different moralities, but I'm saying that we can distinguish between which are better and which are worse, because I'm giving you a measurable, I'm doing air quotes there, what's the word I'm looking for? Measurable, something to do with an M. Forget it. Measurable metric. Okay, well, measurable in the sense that we know most of us know what it's like to not be in this state of eudaimonia, and most of us know what it's like to be closer to a state of eudaimonia. There we go. Between different moral codes and confident assertions made about the superiority of some over others. Why? God, my brain just does it, and then my mouth is just a piece of shit, which is obviously controlled by my brain, but whatever. Luckily, a lack of evidence means we can dispense with severely complicated ideas like an afterlife and focus on the facts at hand. Thankfully, we have amassed a considerable catalogue of information about certain actions and their consequences, and there is no shortage of mistakes to learn from. So there we go, that'll do. We talked about prayer and future authoring, we talked about AI therapists, we talked about why heaven is a bad lie. Because obviously the idea is that the people who advocate for heaven think, but look, this is how it can be a good thing, even if it's not true. But there are consequences to the not truth that you might not have considered, that you would probably be best to consider. Alright, that'll do. Donkey. That'll do. Pig donkey. I hope I didn't miss anything. Oh yeah, I think that's... So, just to clarify, I think maybe if old Kaczynski had a better grasp on spirituality... Not that I do, I don't. That's fucking hell, I'm the worst at it. I don't have a single part of spirituality in my life yet. But I'm going to try and introduce it, because I think it would be good. And again, I don't even like the word, so I'm talking about maybe what did I call it again? Something eudaimonic, something pursuits, life pursuits or something. Eudaimonia oriented life pursuits. Yeah, I think meditation is definitely probably going to be a pretty good one. Really. So yeah, I'm going to do that and then see what else I'm doing. Alright, I'll do. Bye now. I can't believe I'm back. Just a quick little addendum. More about the prayer thing. So obviously one of the things that I could kind of relate to a bit was the wishing for things, right? Because you're told to wish for things when you blow out candles and stuff. And I guess to some degree you have to be... Well, no, I don't think you do, but you're wishing to something in a sense, although because you're not thinking, you don't. If you don't think about it, then you don't actually aware that you probably have to be wishing towards something. Not that there's anything there, but you'd have to, at some level, believe that you're wishing to something if you're doing it in your head. But there's, as well as the wishing kind of prayer, I know that there's you see it in films sometimes, people ask God why something happened. More on the why. Told you it's the biggest one out of the however many of those questions there is. Who, what, when, where, why, how, all that business. Why is the one. So they ask God, why did this happen? Why do you allow these things to happen? Why did my mother die? Why? My mother didn't die, by the way. Thank God. Why did this tsunami happen? Why does my friend have more money than me? Why am I not happy? All these things. And just asking the question might be enough to stimulate yourself to come up with some sort of answer. Maybe it isn't, but you're able to therapize yourself. A little bit, so you can have a little kind of mental therapist. Maybe that's the thing you could do. Maybe you could replace God with a therapist in your brain. Instead of imagining some mystical God in the sky, you just imagine a therapist having a telephone in your head to a therapist. That's kind of what it does a little bit. Anyway, I've spent way too long talking about this pathetic little idea. It was just something I wanted to add on.